Welcome to Jung and Harp. This is episode number 207, The Thing About Beavers. I am Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, an award-winning composer, performer, educator, mentor. I know you're award-winning, and we both play the harp, and that is why we call this Jung at Harp. And almost every week we come together to have a conversation. We start with a question we don't yet have answers to, and we'll see if we find answers in the course of the conversation. But we honor that there is something that happens when we get together and share, that something can emerge that cannot emerge for each of us individually. And if you're joining us live, we invite you into the conversation through the chat feature on the platform that you are watching on now, where you can type in your comments, and in that way you can be a part of our collective creative process, which is part of what got us thinking about beavers and their ecosystem and what that might help us understand about our own internal ecosystem. So, DHC, do you want to talk about beavers?
I would be happy to talk about beavers. And I got to say that this all happens because when I get stressed, I sometimes will watch cat videos, but if I'm very stressed, I will watch beaver videos. And the beaver videos are especially interesting because of what the beavers do and what their job is. And so I've learned a lot about beavers and about how the beaver builds its dam, but that dam then creates a pond, and that pond creates an ecosystem. And within that ecosystem, other animals thrive that wouldn't have been able to thrive otherwise. And I was having a little conversation with AI last weekend about this, because I always go back, wait a minute, but how do the beavers know this? Or what do they do? Or how do they do this? Or how do they do that? And my question was, how do the other animals know how to come to the ecosystem that's happened with the beavers? That's what I was asking this weekend. But as I did that, I began to realize how that ecosystem of the beavers mirrors the ecosystem in my academy, where I'm teaching harpists by and large how to improvise. Harpists of all levels, giving them structures to improvise. So because everyone is at a very different level, technical level, meaning some have been through conservatory, and so their struggles are, well, everyone's struggle is perfectionism at every level that comes up. But each person has a different struggle. And because it's a very disparate is not the right word. I think there's another word there. Community, people are able to learn from each other in different ways. And often the people who are less adept at playing are the ones who are more adept at being able to take on the forms and play with them than people. So it's very helpful for people to see, like, oh, it's not all about like you're a baby this, and then you get better and better and better. But that improvisation is its own art form, and you can become self-expressed at any level of technical ability. But within the academy itself, there are, like, say, 150 people in the academy, and we have different live events each week, and maybe there's maximum 40 or 50 people at a live event. So they're not all there. And of all the people who were there, some of them are sharing. Some of them have their videos on. Some of them had their videos off in Zoom. Some of them are sharing in the chat. Some are not sharing in the chat at all. Some are coming up on the screen sometimes to share something that occurs to them as we're doing it, and some are not. And some are actually sharing work for feedback, and many are not. And that's great, because we all have a role at every time. Regardless, we all have the opportunity to be there and be present, or to lay back and observe. But people can start feeling like, what's my place? They can start feeling like I should be doing what that person's doing. And so I really wanted to find an analogy to help them understand that they can, but they are of value no matter where, no matter how they're showing up. And so I went to look at the ecosystem of the beaver, and then tried to create analogies. Like some animals, you just don't see them at all. You don't see them. but they're there and they're really important, and they're part of the resonance, and they're part of the aeration, and they're part of that ecosystem. Some animals are sort of exploring. They're kind of going around and they're finding things. And because they're going around and exploring, it kind of creates more air in the system. They may not show up a lot, but you do see them. Some animals are, now we're getting to humans, are experimenting. They're trying things out. We may not see what they're trying out. They may be building burrows underground, so we don't see how they're doing it. And then there are some people who I would call builders. You birds, you got your birds, they're building nests. You got your spiders, they're building webs. You got your, there was one other animal that I was thinking of that just, they're building things, and you do see them. But every single one of these animals is the ecosystem, and everyone has a role. And what's beautiful about the human ecosystem in a society, in a group, in a community like that, is that you can shift role. You can decide, like one person took on last quarter, she was like, I have a goal I am going to share every week, and I'm going to share this one thing that I like doing, and I'm going to share this one like part of this, and it was part of a Gregorian chant, and the whole thing was like 14 stanzas long, and she was like, I'm going to do one thing each week, and at the end I'm going to put them all together. And it was great. Each week we saw this thing that you just don't see on a harp, and this was what this person was bringing, and we got to learn so much, and we saw her. So each person, and up until then, she'd been maybe sharing a little bit, and now she was sharing every week. So it's available for people, but they're not necessary. But then they get to decide how to show up. But the big thing is for each person to be able to feel their value, to feel that they're getting and giving value, that their contribution, whatever it is meaningful and valuable. And I struggle with that as well.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about the importance of finding that internal ecosystem where we value ourselves. So many of us have, probably not so many, everybody, all of us, all human beings in their own way, have internalized messages that we're not good enough, that what we do and what we offer isn't right, that it doesn't fit. And so we all have to find that place where we do know our innate value and worth, and we do tap into what is ours to do. The beavers do what's theirs to do. They're instinctive creatures. They don't have the baggage we human beings have to work through that prevent us from knowing what our own energy system wants and following it. And so we have to then do the psychological work of really getting to know our own internal ecosystem and finding what is that for us? Where is it that we do feel our own value and worth underneath all of the internalized voices of perfectionism, of it's got to be done a certain way, you're not doing it right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or what I'm offering isn't good enough. So I'm just right at this moment, I'm holding the complexity for the human being of finding the outer ecosystems where what you said the beavers have is the standard and the norm. So yeah.
And as you were talking about this inner ecosystem or environment, and I was thinking, it is not effective. Like in the outside, it seems like, well, everything's going well in the beaver kingdom. Everybody's doing what there is to do, and it's good. It's good to be a beaver. And as you were describing our internal, I was like, well, that is messed up. I'm thinking about my own, that's messed up. It's like, it's slavery, it's abuse. It's like, there's all this stuff going on inside. And because as you were saying it, I was like, is that really an ecosystem? Isn't an ecosystem where things work together? And and of course and then I realized, so Deborah, your thinking works together well and effectively, whereas clearly there is an ecosystem in here. It is not working as effectively when it comes to certain things. For example, one of the things I was thinking about this morning, I have a couple of things that I like to do each day, and one is track my time. And I have a time tracking buddy, and neither of us, I mean, we're all just like, I tried today, I did it for 2 minutes. Like, I mean, we're really trying, and we're connected. And something that but I have another buddy on Saturdays, we get together and we plan our time, and, we do that. And then I see, well, like, what do I actually do? But what I realized this morning is that I am not celebrating what I am doing.
Mm.
And I want to go back to people playing, because so much happened this morning. I heard somebody talking about golfing this morning, and I was like, what do I want to know about golfing? I don't care about golfing. And then she said, my coach is always telling me that you don't want to jerk up on it. You want to go smoothly. And I was like, oh, that's fluency. That's what I'm always trying to tell people. So what I guess what I'm trying to say is that actually putting in a practice of appreciating, and this sounds so dumb because it's like what I'm always telling people. I say, don't listen for the wrong notes. Stop listening for the wrong notes. Yeah. Start listening to the beauty of the sound of the instrument when you bring it alive. If it helps, think about the builder who built this harp and who, how they felt about it. And so I'm realizing that it is for me to bring my ecosystem alive and enrich it by appreciating each part of it, whatever it is. Like if I, at the end of the day, if I have only put down one thing on my time tracker, instead of being like, I got to go fill everything back in because I got to fix it, be like, no, let's try something different. Let's try going back to that moment that I did track and just feeling it. Mm-hmm. Or at the end of the day, feeling what are all the things that just felt amazing during the day, and get those and write those down, acknowledge them, track them, get their, get their pelts. But no, I don't want to, whatever it is, put it in, make a little internal shrine. Okay, I will stop talking. Kathleen, I'm sure you are having thoughts about this.
Well, part of the thought that I'm having is how important it is to see what in the ecosystem is working to create the peace, the harmony, and the sense of oneness with self internally, and then that extending outward into our outer world experiences so that we can move from that place. Whereas the tendency is to spotlight all the places that, quote, aren't working the way we want, or they're working in the internal ecosystem, even as messed up as it is, but they're interfering with where we want to go in the outer world. And, if we start to pay attention to what is working, we can join with that, or what's working in the sense of that the inner harmony, there's an inner harmony that allows the outer world to harmonize, so that there's a syncopated experience of moving in sync with one's own natural rhythm, one's own natural self.
As you say that, it's reminding me of something else that happened yesterday. May I share it?
Yes, you may.
So in the Academy, there are people who are sharing a lot, and there's someone shared yesterday who hasn't shared for a while, and had been struggling a little bit with, like, is this working for me or is this not working? And what she shared was a wonderful video of being out and playing harp with someone else in a park. And it was all improvised. And what I noticed what made me think of this is when you were saying your natural rhythm, getting really being with your natural rhythm. And I heard, and presenting your natural rhythm to the world in a sense. And so what I heard was that one person, the person who had greater experience at the harp, was doing something like this. And it might change, but there was a similarity to it. And then this person who had sort of never known how to fit in with things like that. Let me see if I can just loop that so that I can show you what she did. So so I'm kind of, can you hear that? That is
Yeah.
still going. And so I just want you to watch. So she would either do this. So she would have something that fit in with what was happening there, or she would do something like this. That embellished what was happening. And there were a couple of times where I could tell that she was kind of thinking, oh, I should be playing with two hands because the other person is two. And then I could see her be sort of uncomfortable and then come back and be more integrative. Now, she was able to do what she did, which was beautiful, and was intuitive and was more intuitively musical than she could know, because she was doing things that were part of a musical language. She was fitting in with the harmony, or she was creating like what percussion does in an orchestra, creates this like this thing that kind of comes out of nowhere. And what was I saying? Oh, I forgot what I was saying. What was I talking about? Oh, but it all happened because the other person was setting up a very clear rhythm, and was very interesting because that other person was really in her own world, but very much, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And you could see that made it possible for there to be this integration of the two people. And I think, like, going back to Beavers, I noticed when I was talking to the Academy members about this, I kept saying, and the beaver does what the beaver does. The beaver just does what the beaver does. And when that happens, a pond is created. And then the other animals have a place and they do what they do. None of them comes to the pond because, like, I'm going to become a beaver because this is where beavers are beavers. They don't do that. They come to the pond to be who they are in that environment. Now, I'm not a naturalist, so I'm probably, romanticizing the beaver pond.
Well, yeah, and I think, yes, you probably are, because part of what I've been thinking, the beavers create a new ecosystem, which, if it's out in the nature wild, is going to impact everything around it. And if it happens to be on your farm where you're dependent on the flow of the water downstream for irrigating your crops, then the impact of that beaver ecosystem is not in sync and in harmony with the need of the other. And so I think that part of what we have to understand and know about is what is the ecosystem that we enhance and that we're in harmony with? Where is their fit? Where is there? Because your example of your two people who met in the park, your students who met in the park, they came together wanting to do that experimentation and exploration and to build together. And neither one of them had a sense of the way it had to be. They each brought a part. It's like, sometimes I think about it as a potluck meal, or, we're going to show up and you bring what's in your refrigerator that needs to be used. I'll bring what's in mine and we'll create a meal together. And that's a very different ecosystem than an ecosystem where everyone already has there's an expectation that everyone then has to fit into. Beavers are instinctive, again, so that it's easier for them. In my fantasy world, the naturalist, again, may tell us that's different. But as human beings, we get it all. Our consciousness is both a blessing and a curse. We can get things all contorted. So
I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that, and because in the context of what happens when we clumsily stumble into an ecosystem in which
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just having my moment of identification.
Right. Well, I thought you would, and I'm about to think about doing something like that didn't occur to me, that I might be stumbling in awkwardly. So I would love to hear you talk about your experience if you wish to.
Yeah, so part of for me, I'm coming off the heels of having been quite in my mind, courageous to play a 20-minute set of tunes on my harp with my professional folk musician husband in his annual St. Patty's Day concert at the college where he's an adjunct professor. And I put a lot of energy and preparation and time into it. And we had a wonderful musician friend who joined in, also who's also a guitarist and fiddler. My husband plays all the folk strings except the harp. So, and they're both, they perform all the time. And then the word perform freaks me out. So I can't even think about performance practice. I think about sharing practice. Okay, this is what I've had to do. Because in my ecosystem internally, performance goes, ah! I mean, it's immediately a setup for criticism and judgment. But if I think about,
can I just interrupt before you say that? Despite the fact that you are often performing in terms of, right?
Well, I present all the time, and I present to groups of 500 people, and I'm calm, but I never think about it as performing. I think about it as I'm presenting, and I am co-creating an experience in the moment with the participants who are there. So my presentations are usually very interactive, and I always have a ritual meditation, which is like a prayer for me that I do prior to going on stage, where I ask that Spirit use me as a conduit, so that there is one thing that I say that is that each person in the audience needs to hear. And so part of what I did backstage before I came out to play my harp set on Sunday is I was watching John and Cecil on stage. And so I stood there and I said a version of that prayer for my harp playing and my music, which I believe really did help me move with poise and grace, even though at times internally I was bumbling and felt my fingers bumbling. So for me, it isn't ever a performance. That doesn't exist in my inner ecosystem, because I want to move from a relational place. And for me, in relationship, performance sets up a hierarchical structure, whereas sharing allows a co-creative structure. So that's part of what I know about myself. And interestingly enough, in my preparation for the concert and my practice, when I was thinking about it as performance practice, I was just freaking out. And I realized, wait, Kathleen, you decided a long time ago you're not ever doing performance practice, but you're going to do sharing practice. And as soon as I did that, I felt my body relax. So this is an example of, for me, my internal ecosystem. So I'm not a good fit where someone is more caught up in the performance and how it's supposed to look a certain way. I'm much more of a fit where people want to share and co-create an experience with whomever shows up in the audience. And although I wasn't having dialogue with people in the audience, there is the engagement of, facial contact, body language, people's, verbal responses, clapping, that kind of thing. But I believe there's an energetic co-creation, and that comes out of my understanding of psyche and the unconscious. Now, I've taken a little bit of a circuitous direction here, but I think that, the Beavers are all operating according to the same instinctive template. And probably the Beaver, where that instinctive template gets a little torqued in the birth process, doesn't do really well out in nature. Again, we human beings, because of consciousness, our ecosystem, we have an instinctive ecosystem that we all share, but then there's a personal layer on top of it that totally changes that. We have to know what that personal layer is in order to find our way.
Yeah, so many stuff has come to me. So first of all, I mean, it's interesting that you were talking about what you think of as performance, something having to be right. Just because I think I don't think of performances that way. When you described the other part, I was like, yeah, that's what I like. And that's why I feel safe on stage, is that I'm always thinking, like, you come, you have a structure that you're going to, a little framework that's a little boat that you're planning. And then you see what happens and you open it up in such a way. And usually the most magical thing that happens is either some accident or something someone asks or, something that's more interactive. But the other thing, because my brain can't, it's interesting because the beaver will, as soon as the beaver hears running water, it's got to go over and it's got to fix its dam. That's just a thing that happens. I think anytime I hear anything, someone you were, I think of a show. Oh, you can make a show out of that. Meaning, what I was thinking was, oh, well, that prayer could be something that you do on stage, and whether people know that you're doing it or not. And it just reminded me of what I always did when I was first starting to play and trying to get jobs. And the very first thing that I would do is go in and play something that sounded complex, but that let's see if I had a bigger harp then, so I could go all the way up and come back down. But it sounded complex. But it was the same patterns. It was one shape. It was this shape that was very comfortable for my hand, which I call, it's a modified three-legged dog, but we don't need to know that. But the point was that it was something that I could do that appeared to others that I was playing music, but in fact, I was doing everything you're talking about. Calming myself down, connecting with the instrument, and getting ready to actually, and I could do it as much as I wanted. Then I was ready. Then I'm ready to actually play the piece. And it just sounds really interesting to me, the idea of how would I make a show out of every single thing that you mentioned, so that the show itself was actually the connection with all these parts of the internal. And I'm not seeing it as an ecosystem, because I always think of ecosystems as varied things fitting in together. So I think of the internal system more like an environment. But I'd like to know why you think. Anyway, so John is no, it's Tovala. Says, absolutely touched by your prayer before you share your harp with others. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing. It is making me think about creating them as snippets, because I'm usually teaching people snippets that you could improvise to, like, that's a snippet. But there is the snippet for connection.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thing, because, had I been, if I were playing solo, then I probably would have come out and started with something similar to what you did, my own version of that, just to get settled in with the harp. Because I was playing with other musicians, there wasn't that, yeah. I
would just like to say that this is something that the harpist can, well, anyone can, but can provide to both the audience and the players. It is so beautiful to have to come out and have the pathway created to the rhythmic and then to the virtuosic. And it's such a beautiful pathway rather than boom, boom, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not saying.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I'll have to advocate for myself a little better next time.
Yeah, please, I think that you're advocating for the audience as well, because music, like, there's a transition between silence and sound, and it's this little journey that we get to go on, and being brought into it is just so exquisite. And it's one of the reasons why I mean, I've always loved musicals since I was a kid, but I especially loved The Music Man because of the way, if you look at the musical, the
Mm-hmm.
ways that he goes from speaking to song are
Mm-hmm.
just exquisite, and they use human interaction. Like one of them is just like making a rhythm out of something, like what, I don't know the words, like dun da da dun 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 da 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 dun da da dun dun. Someone's saying something, but then it becomes a rhythm. In another one, I don't remember how it goes from speech to song. And then in another one, there's a music teacher, and she's playing this melody, this little snippet. Oh, and then that becomes the underpinning for the singing. And
Right.
it's so beautiful because it reminds us of how close music is to our speech. And what are the first thing that we do? Like, I mean, we breathe when we come. Don't get me started. Okay, carry on. I can tell that I'm on a roll here.
But I think what you're saying is important because music is a language. Music is a language. And so to be able to allow oneself to be with that language, just like one is with the language of words, and
Right. And to not
yeah,
feel like you have to be super erudite in
right.
order to have the right. And yet at the same time, you were talking about going to play with some other people. Like I think we've both been in that situation where there was an environment in which people could play at a certain, quote, level, kind of like my running, and people who just don't want to run with me because it's just like, oh, I can't run that slow. But interestingly, some great runners can run that slow.
Well, and again, I think this is a part of knowing whether or not we're in an ecosystem where the log we add to the dam is going to impact the overall surroundings in a way that keeps the music flowing, the water flowing, or are we in an ecosystem where we put the log dams up what someone else wants downstream? And I have had the experience of feeling as if, and I'll own it, it's my feeling as if I have been in sessions and jams where what I was doing was experienced by some other people as a jam. That somehow
Right.
I wasn't, and it didn't feel as if what I was doing was contributing to the flow as they were feeling it. And, so I do think it is important for us when we think about beavers and we think about our own ecosystem that we know some things about ourselves and we recognize we exist and then someone else exists and then we come together and we see what happens. Jung says he uses an alchemical metaphor regarding the analyst and the analyst, and he says the coming together is like the mixing together of two chemicals. You never quite know what's going to happen. I want to just circle back for a minute though to what you were saying, because I think this is important, an important example of how important it is to know our own ecosystem. For me, the word performance has a lot of very negative association and baggage. And for you, the word performance takes you right at home to a relaxed place of relational engagement. And so I think this is an example of where it's so important to know that for me, that word, that paradigm evokes all kinds of negative things that block the flow of my energy. For you, it just puts you right in the river going. And neither's wrong.
Right.
They're just
It's good to
different.
know. Yeah.
And so I think that for us to know our own ecosystem, how it is, what is the language, and within the language of music or the language of words, what are the phrases, the designations, the notes, the words that actually best resonate with our experience of the flow of our energy.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about just because my experience as a child was there was there were times when someone would be performing and you would watch them, but there were also many, many times when there was something happening and there was a part for everybody. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, what made that possible? And because in my mind, like, well, anybody can make an ensemble. Anyone can make an ensemble. I get that anyone can't make an ensemble, but I would just like to say that one of the things that makes it work, even the simplest thing work, is having a consistent rhythm. Because when you have a consistent rhythm, something can fit in with that. If someone's like, well, wait a second, let me try to get this right. Okay, now I have this right. Okay, no, I kind of, when someone's playing beyond their technical ability, and then so into themselves that they cannot create that rhythm for others, there's no space for others. I'm not saying that's anything that you did. I was just, as you were speaking, it reminded me that when I was a kid, I remember seeing some movie on television, and there were, they'd gone to Africa and everybody was playing the drums around in a circle. And I was like, how is that music? Like, and I was like, why are they doing that? It's so boring. Why are they doing? But it stuck with me because they clearly were not bored. They were clearly very engaged, but it was so different than what I'd seen of other people performing in the world. And as I move forward and begin to understand the importance of people playing together, I realized, oh my God, what they were doing is, as a community, they were practicing the rhythm. They were practicing some rhythms that everyone would know. They were practicing how do people fit in with that rhythm. They were practicing what to do when you're not playing and you're dancing instead. And so they were practicing all those things. And we instead, what do we practice? Buy the ticket, go to the concert, sit there, shut up and listen. And it makes, one thing I would love to do, I started doing this years ago. It was called World Harp Ensemble. And it was just creating games, kind of like musical games that people can play together to understand, like when you said, what fits with what. Because like when I first started playing with a bass player, I was used to playing like this, like you can see, I don't know if you can see it, I'm playing with my left hand and my right hand. And as I played, he was like, get out of my space. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, you're down there in that part of the harp, get out. And I was like, but then I'd just be using half the harp. And he was like, yeah, yeah, because that's my area. It was very, I had to learn that if there are these roles, then I can play my role. I can be as creative as I want to be in that role, but I'm able to integrate with somebody else and with a larger structure, the game or the piece that I can play around with. That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not familiar with the World Harp Ensemble, so are you still doing that? I like this idea.
I just made it up, and I wrote some. I haven't.
That's okay.
I do have music. I actually made like a website, World Harp Ensemble, and I was like, and here's the music for it. And my idea was that I could go. I know it's cool. I could go around the world, and then I could play with these ensembles. So
I love it.
Oh well, I'll send you there sometime.
Okay, send me there. I like that. We're going to have to stop in a couple of minutes, but I want to circle back the thing about Beavers, because one of the things that I don't want us to leave out, and I think you don't either probably, is the importance of relationship. Because, the Beavers work in community. And what we do every week, or almost every week, is in community. And your online Harp Academy is community. My online embodiment circle, it's community. So that importance of being able to work together. And, for me, it's a very different experience when I sit down and play my harp by myself solo, and then playing with other people, joining in, wanting to be a part of an ensemble. So you said something that's important, which is you had to learn. The boyfriend bass player, he said, get out of my space. You had to learn. And I would say you not only had to learn how to use just half the harp, but you also had to value it. You had to see it as legitimate, as enough, as offering something of value. So we're back again to what I would say has to do with the internal ecosystem and our own value, what it is we feel is worthy. Back to again finding that which we know has substantiability, that offers something to people. And so I think thinking like this, having these paradigms and ideas, I think is important for us in being able to move forward and not stumble into situations where we do become the logjam, because that doesn't feel good.
Right.
And it just leaves some negative residue that then, one's got to clear the sludge out of the river, So I just want to highlight that, because that seems important when we're in community, that there's so much we can co-create that we can't create on our own. And we also have to recognize that if we come together to experiment, we have to recognize, that really didn't sound good with where they were going, or it didn't sound the way I wanted it to, or they wanted it to, without going into an internal collapse of I'm no good, I don't have anything of value to offer, I should just play in the living room by myself. I don't know if anybody else has ever felt that.
As you were talking, I'm thinking, as I went through this process with him, my surprise was often that what was valuable to him in accompanying him, for example, was to be consistent and reliable, not impressive, but consistent and reliable. And I remember when I first kind of learned a way of fitting in with other players, I was playing with Denny Yale and the Regency Strings, and a guy named, so it was a strolling violin group of people who were very, very good at what they were doing. And I was just learning, and Jack Nebergall was the harpist that he was bringing me in as his sub. And I got to watch him, and he was clever and smart enough to say, here's some of the things you can do to fit in. And I watched him do these things, which I later discovered were, when I started orchestrating for a symphony orchestra, I saw, these are the kinds of things that you would have a percussion section do. They're not playing the rhythm, they're playing the sparkle of it. But I got to watch him, and I was surprised, because he was doing so much less than I thought I should do if I was playing, because I had that idea. So what I'm getting out of this is to go back and look at where I want to fit in, or where I want and find out about that ecosystem, and then share what I have to share in a clear way, so that they can say, yes, this fits with ours, or it doesn't fit with ours.
Yeah, and I really want to hold on to the idea of consistency and reliability being important in a relational space.
Yeah, I want to do that too.
Which includes music.
Yes.
It includes play, but consistency and reliability in the relational space with myself, with my harp, with other musicians I might be playing with. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Tovala, and thank you for everyone who has 100% of 100% of you is here, whether you're observing, whether you're experimenting, whether you're exploring, whether you're sharing or building. And thank you so much for being part of this, and for everything that people share both on and off the screen. And Kathleen, thank you. You may not be here next week. I may try to come on without you. And I hope that I will see all of you next week.
Visit jungatharp.com for show notes, contact links, and to follow the ongoing conversation. That's Jung, as in Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, and harp, as in the many-stringed instrument.